Everyone, and welcome back to Sudden Wealth. I hope you're having a very good day. If you do enjoy the content, please consider dropping that like and subscribe. Now, I wanted to discuss something a bit different this time, which is the US dollar as the reserve currency. So we hear this around a lot, the de-dollarization, all of these things. And I don't think actually most people understand what that means in every single detail, okay? So, being the reserve currency is not a new thing, okay? The first one was the Portuguese currency, then we had the Spanish one, the Dutch, the British, and finally the US dollar. All the other currencies stopped being the reserve currency. Why? Because at the end of its cycle, they ended up having too much debt, too many wars, too much spending, inflation, and weak leadership. This sounds familiar, right? And these things usually last, depending on which one, between 50, 75 years, depending on which, and we are actually approaching the later stage. Now, why is this so relevant? That means that the rest of the world actually holds your currency, not their own, as reserves. This is very important. Why? Because when you print money, a lot of it goes outside, which means that you actually are exporting inflation. So if you want to guess why the UK is having so much inflation, amongst other things, is when they print a lot of sterling pounds, they stay in the UK because nobody else in the world needs it. So what has been happening? The US has something called trade deficit. What does that mean? You have imports on one side, things that come into your country, exports, things that go outside your country. When you have a deficit, that means that you import much more than you export. Okay, but think what's happening here. So the goods are coming into the country and paper money is going outside. Goods take a lot of effort to produce. Paper money, it's very easy. Nowadays actually it's digits. It's not even paper anymore. And what those countries like China, Japan, do, they get that currency, our currency, the US dollar, and they buy the US debt and the US financial assets. So our debt market goes up, our financial assets go up, which means Americans get to live way above its how they should. Meaning, here's what they produce, here's their quality of life, there's a mismatch in favor of the Americans. And also, about 50% of world trade is done in dollars. Why is this so relevant? You can have literally a Japanese bank working with a Vietnamese company, and the transaction will be in dollars. Think about it. The dollar has nothing to do with any of these currencies, but they will do it in that currency because all the others are illiquid, weak, etc. So, the US has been having the ability of printing money to pay for trade deficits, for government spending, for government programs, without feeling the harm in terms of very high levels of inflation. However, every year, by doing this, a little bit of the productivity is deteriorated, or a little bit of inflation always kicks in. Where do you see this? Well, nowadays we have high levels of inflation, but in the past it seemed that there was no issue. Actually, that's wrong. In the 60s, you would have families with one salary. Typically, the man would have bachelor degree, maybe high school diploma. They could have 4 children, a house, 2 cars, go on holiday, everything. Nowadays, you have a couple, both with master's degree, and they both struggle to have 2 children. So that's the price you're paying. You're just paying it over so long that it's very hard to see. Now, and basically, if you look at the manufacturing capabilities of the US, there was a point where the US made everything in the world and was the largest creditor nation. They lent money to everybody because they were so rich. Nowadays, it's the complete opposite. They are the largest debtor, and they have trade deficits with pretty much everyone. Now, but the US has certain advantages that other previous currencies didn't have. The US has a lot of land, a lot of natural resources for food, energy. Actually, the largest oil and gas reserves are not in the Arab countries, they are actually in the US, and they have military, and they have water all across from all the sides. So the US has a lot of natural advantages. But like all the others, reserve currencies, they couldn't resist printing too much money, going too much into debt, doing very little for a high living standard. So eventually, it was bound to happen. The US was trying to kind of support who they think are their friends and to harm who they think are their enemies, right? And this is a problem because all reserve currencies should be neutral, okay? They shouldn't partake in any war, which makes sense. If you are the reserve currency, every nation holds your currency, you shouldn't be taking part in wars. Otherwise, the other countries will think, okay, these guys did something the US didn't like, maybe in 3 years I'll do the same, and I will get kicked out of the system. So that's why you see Germany, the UK, France having meetings with China and defending a lower power of the dollar going forward. This is the price you pay. Now, in that context, an asset like Bitcoin or like crypto in general would be great for a global reserve currency. Why? You can't be printed because the supply is mathematically done. It belongs to no government. It's literally, neutral. And it kind of puts the governments in check because you cannot print unlimited amounts of it. So my blue sky, pie in the sky scenario is one day, one of the cryptocurrencies, I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin, maybe other one, I don't know, will actually become the global reserve currency. Now, governments will fight it. There's no doubt about it. They will not just accept it, but they may be forced to accept it if the situation becomes difficult enough in the world, with the expansion of debt, with the money printing, with the devaluation of currency, and lowering of living standards. On that day, I don't know how much Bitcoin would be in that scenario, probably 5 million a coin, something like that. But maybe one day it will be held as a global reserve currency. So the same way that the doom and gloomers think Bitcoin will go to zero, people who are actually bullish on the crypto can go to the other side and say, okay, maybe it's going to be one day the global reserve currency. Who's going to be right? Well, we need to wait and see, okay? So thank you very much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.